Okay, 18 seconds. Ready to go.
When I arrived on the farm, it was a beautiful place. It's like I was reborn. I'm in a new place. There's flowers all over the place. There's a huge house. I hear animals. There's trees with fruits on them. There's tomatoes growing. There's a garden of everything. It's just great. Well, my job was I was going to become a cow herder. The cows will be mine. I have to get up early in the morning. I got to clean the cows, take them out in the pasture, bring them back about 6 or 7 o'clock for milking.
I assume you've never done that before.
Never. But what is there to learn? You know, you learn on the job. You know, he says, look, are you afraid of animals? I said, no. I've been around horses because my uncle had a horse. I used to go on vacation time, take him out on the pasture, ride him there without a saddle, and take him out in the pasture and have some in a field full of clover. And he said, the only thing you have to do here is make sure that when you take them out, make sure they're in our fields, not in our neighbors' fields, because they don't know. The cows don't know it, but you have to guide them, though, because we don't want to have any problems with the neighbors. And I said, no, that should be no problem. Now, on the farm, he had another young man who also was Jewish. His name was Shimek Schwimmer. He actually didn't look Jewish. He had blonde, curly hair, and he was an all-around guy, kind of. He did all kinds of works with the horses. He was going to town with the wagon. He was helping Mr. Sonderman clean his guns, and he was helping Mr. Sonderman operate his motorcycle. He was very fond of it. So he did all kinds of stuff. It seems that Mr. Sonderman knew his parents because Shimek grew up not far away from where Mr. Sonderman had the farm. And at one time they had an action going on in that village, and Shimek was able to run away, and he never saw his parents again. And when he wandered off, he came to the farm. Mr. Sonderman knew him, and the father and the mother, and so he took him in. So that's why I met him over there. Besides that, they had 2 more women working there, and 2 more Polish fellas, because it wasn't a huge farm. It was a farm to sustain food for maybe 50 people, and that's all he wanted. He had a huge orchard, a huge garden. He had the 5 milking cows that were Holsteins, and he had, by the way, he figured, oh, you're doing so well with the cows. How about if you take care of the pigs? I said, no problem. So he had a lot of pigs there, and he was feeding them all the stuff we had, the waste, whatever you don't finish eating, peelings, all this they were eating. And then he had Shimek go to the local brewery every day, and he was bring back several barrels full of hops, used up hops, because they used to brew the beer with the hops. Now, hops is very fattening for the pigs. And I have to laugh because when I would go in and clean their stalls, and let me tell you something, when they say pigsties, you're talking about pigsties, literally. And those poor things, they were bouncing off the walls because they were drunk from the hops. And they, I'm laughing because it is funny because, they would slaughter them. Of course, you don't raise pigs just to be raising them. You raise them until they get so big that they can't walk anymore. And he had a smokehouse there, and so they would kill the pig. And I remember the first time they're killing the pig, and he says, back up. I got to say this.
Hope they didn't ask you to kill
No. As we were driving to the farm that particular morning, he says to me, he says, I'm not going to call you Oscar. Your name from now on is Oleg. I said, why? He says, Oleg sounds more Polish. He says, Oscar is too German. He says, we don't want to go there. I said, well, that's okay. So I'm Oleg from now on. So by the way, he said to me that day, Oleg, you have to see, because I'm sure you never have seen how a pig is being killed. Well,
which was true.
It is true, and it has nothing to brag. A kill is a kill, and, I'm not going to go into the thing and say how it is killed. Or maybe I should, because, you see, he was a German collaborator. Whether or not he was on any actions, I do not know. Chances are he could have been. On the other hand, maybe not. But to have me to chase that poor animal through the doorway into another barn, only to be greeted with a baseball bat on both sides and hit on the head until the poor thing fell over, and then Mr. Zonderman comes over with that big old knife and knew exactly where the heart was and hit him there with that knife into the heart. And immediately they would tie the hind legs up and raise it on a hoist and have a big container on the bottom to collect the blood, because this is important.
Sure.
You use it to make sausage, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And of course he would try the blood while it was warm to drink, and he offered some to me, which I said, no thank you, I don't
What, to drink the blood?
drink blood.
Wow. Probably warm.
Well, it showed me the other side of Mr. Sunderman. In other words, there's two sides to the coin and two sides to every human being as well. Well, it ended up being bacon and chops and smoked ham for the Germans, whom he tried to be friends with, get all kinds of favors, no doubt. And he used to entertain them every weekend. They would come, different groups, and they drink wine. And
to the farm?
To the farm, and they go home with all kinds. And I don't know why he was bribing them. For what reason, I never could find out. But the good life, I had a room right on top of he said, you're going to have a room all by yourself. And the room was on top of the barn, in the barn. I had to crawl over some bales of hay. And of course you got to scurry around the rats out of the way. And you open up a door, and there was a little room, had a bed and a nightstand. That was my room. And it was very quiet there, and it had an alarm clock, because you got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you could get down in the morning, and you walk in there and put the light on, and got to clean those cows up. They were walloping in there, in their waste all night, and you got to clean them up, and you got to hose down the cement and put some new straw on the ground, take the old one out, put it on the compost pile behind the barn, and then you take them out. Take a good sip of cold water from the well, which was ideal, and you stay there, and then you come back. The cows knew exactly when to go back. It's almost like they had a built-in clock. Once of a sudden they went moo-moo, and they turned around, and up they went. They went right into the barn, had a drink of water in the trough they had out there prepared, and I just tied them down, gave them some more straw, and the girls came in to milk them. I went, cleaned myself up, went in them. One thing I can say about the Sundermans, we all ate in the main house in the big kitchen together. Breakfast, dinner, everybody together. Mr. and Mrs. The Mrs. was a very nice lady. She was very nice. She always talked to us. There was no such thing as we're some kind of help, or no, we just come and eat, and clean up and go out again, do your work, and come
probably
back.
appreciated your help on
Yeah,
the farm.
she did. And, of course, the day came, this was that one particular Sunday. There were some people, and I could tell that there were some higher-ranking guys, and I recognized one or two guys from Pomorska, because I was there coming off and on with my dad, and I've seen those guys before, and I asked myself, God, what are they doing here? And evidently, this sounds so strange, because when the Germans want to do something, everything has to be done precisely. There's no deviation from one of the other. They knew that there's 2 Jews working there. Now, why this was important for them to know, I have no idea. I mean, if Sonderman wouldn't have told them, how would they have known that there's 2 Jews? We didn't go around with our arm.
You were not tattooed.
No. So if he would have kept his mouth shut, they wouldn't have known. But they have said, look, the final solution is coming. The liquidation of the Krakow ghetto will be coming here pretty soon. He says, any workplaces where they keep the Jews overnight has to cease. So that means those 2 have to go.
Wow.
And that evening he invited us, for coffee and cake, and that's one thing they never did. Dinner, yes, supper, breakfast, but just to come in and schmooze, coffee and cake. So we knew something is not right here. And so...
Did you used to go back to your home in the ghetto?
Oh,
Every
he took
night?
us. No, we stayed there on the farm.
You stayed on the farm in the barn.
Right, we stayed there. But
your mother knew you were staying there.
She knew that I was there, safe.
Oh, right.
And during that time, I forgot that. During that time, he always told me, he says, whenever you want to go for a visit, I'll take you. And he did. He took me, and whenever he did take me for a visit, his sidecar was loaded with food.
Good.
Oh, yeah. He was a good man, no doubt.
So you're
dumb, yes, but a good man. What can I say? I suppose if he could have redo whatever he has done, he would have done it differently. He never would have said that we were Jews.
He never would have exposed you.
Yeah, because there's always something that comes back to kick you in the butt. Needless to say, he said that, you guys are going to have to go back to the ghetto, and that this is what's happening. But he says, I'm going to see to it. He says, I know a lot of the people at Pomorska to see if I can arrange something. And sure enough, he arranged a job for Shimek. He knew this guy. He was Oberscharführer, I think, Martens, and he had the garage where the Germans kept all their trucks and cars. There was the motor pool, and he assigned him in there. So he was going to be working there. He's going to be he's going to be washing cars at the night shift with another Jewish guy. And with me, he went to my dad and he said, listen, Unterscharführer Fritsche, Hans Fritsche. He says, I know him as well, and he knows that Oleg, Oscar, was working here. And you ask him if he can find work for him and for your other son and for your daughter and for your wife. He's a guy, he can do that. And so my dad talked to him because he was the gentleman, he was the German whom he did the collar at first.
Yes.
And so he realized that my dad had something. He was a man who knew what he was doing. So my dad comes home and he says, I've got it made for Ilsa and for Sigmund and you. He says, that's a done deal. He says, he's working now to get some papers for Mom. And if we can do that, then we all will be together. And the way it's going to work out is that the people who will work for Pomorska will have to be, because the ghetto will be liquidated, so they have to go and live somewhere. So there was another German on Pomorska. He was what we call the quartermaster. He takes care of the whole complex. And this particular thing fell on him. They said, listen, his name was Eckert, you need to find a spot where we can house those Jews who are going to work for us. Not only will they work for us, but we have to have workshops in the place where they're going to be sleeping, where they're going to be living. And they have to have workshops on Pomorska itself, because we do not want our officers to run over there to them into this building. They have to be here, somewhere housed in a basement or on the ground floor in workshops, and if they need to go up and take measurements, they should be there on call. No problem. And that's how it went. In other words, they secured a place which calls Helslof. Helslof was a huge, huge building. They already had on the bottom floor German prisoners. Those were prisoners who did things like disorderly conduct, not becoming conduct to the German Reich or to the Aryan people. There were people who disagreed with Nazism. There were people who were thieves, who were stealing, or some of them who killed some of the Germans. So they had a lot of them there. They had also a very secret installation there, which you could hear like teletyping of some sort or typewriting, which were nothing but women, and they were completely isolated. They were German, but they never had any contact with anyone else. And they put us on the very top floor. There was no bars, but our main door was locked for the night. And so they had the workshops there. They had the plumbers, not the plumbers, but the carpenters. They had a shop there. And they had the bootmakers and the tailors. And the rest of the people just lived there. In other words, what we had there were bunk beds. We had a room, because those rooms were large. They were occupied before we went there, before the Germans took over. The whole building was occupied by nuns. It had a beautiful chapel in the middle of the building, which nobody used. And it was a very bright, very nice place. I have a picture of it. And we had bunk beds. On the bunk bed, we had, the old, what they call, I don't know what they call them, a croaker sack. It's a type of a material which is being used for sacks to put potatoes in, and we used to put straw in it. Fill it up with straw, and then you lie on it. Of course, in the beginning it's very bad because you have no sheets, and it just kind of bites you here and there. But after a few weeks, it gets all powdery, and then after 2 or 3 months, you got to replace it because you're lying on boards. It's all kind of squished together. We could roam freely back and forth. You go from one room to another. My dad, my brother, and I, we were in one room. The women were further down the hall, and they had their little room. And so it was a get-together in the evening where we, after work, we could get together.
And you were fed regularly at that time?
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
And in the morning, we had to get up, and the ones who had to go to work to the Pomorska, we had to wait, and the truck would pick us up, take us there, and bring us back. And food. The food was prison food. Now, when I say prison food, the prison was called Montelupich. Montelupich prison was an old army prison, Polish army prison, which was built possibly in the late 1800s. And it was across the street from Helslows. It was a notorious bad prison when the Germans took over. It was the halls of death, so to speak. It was... You came out either dead or alive, but when you came out alive, you were transported to what they called Chujowa Górka, which was in Plaszow, from the outskirts of Krakow, and you were shot. And your body would just fall into in a stone quarry. You know, they didn't even bother to bury you. And eventually, later on, they were sorry because they didn't realize how many people they had to kill. So they had to get those people out, and then they start burning them on pyres. You know, just a pile of bodies, a pile of wood, and a pile of bodies. That was Montelupi, very, very bad place. It just people knew it even after the war that it had such a bad taste that no one wanted to even walk by that prison. So when the day came that I had to report with my brother, not my sister yet, my brother and I were told, because Fritzsche wanted us there, he says, they need to come and report to Pomorska, but they cannot come to Pomorska. They have to go to Montelupi prison from the ghetto. And we got a special permission slip to leave the ghetto. And we couldn't use the streetcar, and that was on the other side of town, so we had to walk. And it was funny because he said, when Pritchett told my dad, he says, make sure that they have a little suitcase so they have some, whatever clothes they have, because they will not come back to the ghetto. He said, they're going, and eventually you're going to end up with them. You know, you're all going to end up in the same place, but they need to be there because we need people to work to get Helslows ready. The bunk beds have to be made, put together. They have to be brought upstairs. And all those what we call the mattresses, the beddings have to be fixed. So those two guys can do that. So he says when they go to the thing, to Montelupi, to the prison, they report to the commandant of that jail. And so we walked, and we finally get to the gate. Now the gate, there's a wall. The gate is an old rusted gate, iron gate, and had this old-fashioned bell which is hanging on a rod. And we're standing there and we're looking at each other, and I said, well, Sigmund, you're the older one. I said, you're the taller one. You ring the bell. So he rings the bell, and he goes ding-dong a couple of times, and pretty soon you hear this click, 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 click. You can hear the hoofbeats of the shoes of their boots. And they've got this little what they call it, this little hole to look through to see who's going. And you can see that eyeball is looking left and right, and the door opens up, and he's laughing. It's a huge guy standing there, a German, in his uniform, Gestapo uniform. He's got this, insignia with the crossbones, the worst guys you can meet. And he's laughing. He's putting his hands on his hips, and he's laughing. He's yelling, "Horst, come over here," in German. He said, "You got to see this." He says, "Look, we got a couple of Jews. They want to move in here with the suitcases." He says, "We have to go all over the city looking for them, and they come over here by themselves." And so, to humor them, we started to laugh. We figured, well, might as well join the gang. So, all right, so he takes us into the courts, over to the courtyard, and it was horrible to see this.
You knew you were not going back to the ghetto.
We knew that, yeah.
Right.
And, of course, the courtyard, you could see, there's one side on the side was a wall. It had millions of bullet holes in and riddled. And, this must have been the execution site. And, pretty soon we were walking into the main entrance, into the building itself, and I can smell it even today. That smell will never leave you. The smell of human waste and Lysol. It was dreary. It was dark. The paint was dark gray. It was kind of an enamel, and everything was, when they were walking, the boots were just echoing. It was just like trembling. It's like, wow, what is this? And then we make a left turn here, and then he knocks on the door, and he opens up the door, and he clicks his heels and throws this Heil Hitler, and he's making this funny remark with a laugh, about us coming in here by ourselves. And the commandant, he never looked at him. He never looked at us. He was just looking at his desk, doing whatever he was doing. And he just waved the guy on with his hand and said, dismissed. And the guy did a couple of more clicks and another Heil Hitler, and he left. And we just stood there, quiet. And after a while, he looked up and he said, is your name Knoblauch? And my brother answered first. He said, yes. He says, this is German. And he said, yes. And he said, were you born where? Here in Poland? He said, no, we were born in Germany. Where were you born? In Leipzig. And what are you doing in Poland? Well, we had to leave because we were Polish citizens. Ah. And he said, okay. Then he rings the bell, and somebody comes in, and he says, take him to this and this cell. And he says, by the way, he says, when you get to the cell, you'll find your dad is there already waiting for you.
Oh, wow.
So there was a whole bunch of guys already in there. The electrician was there, and there's some tailors, and so we stayed the night there. And the next morning, we got cleaned up, and of course, they went to work to Pomorska, and we went to work across the street to Helslös to arrange the living quarters. There were some other people working. They had some German prisoners working. So we kind of talked with them because they were prisoners. And so we were prisoners too, but we were Jews. But they seemed to be like, they didn't care whether we were Jews or not, because to them, it didn't matter, because whatever they did, it didn't agree with the Nazis anyways. So they figured, hey, it doesn't really matter. And so our new thing started. So the next day, I'm being told that I need to go with the group to Pomorska because they're going to assign me to a job. When we got to Pomorska, Fritchen comes in and he meets Eckert in the assembly room, and he says, well, he called me the kleine Knoblauch, the little Knoblauch, because my dad was over 6 foot, and my brother was taller than I, so I was the kleine Knoblauch. And Eckert evidently must have met my brother already, and my father. And Eckert, I'm standing there very quiet, I'm saying nothing, and Eckert's looking at me, and he said to Fritchie, he says, what am I going to do with that skinny Jew? And he said, you're going to find something for him to work. He says, look at him. He won't be able to carry 50 or 60 kilos of coal up to the 3rd floor. He said, well, give it a try. Maybe he can. So he had the foreman, Max, which was a Jewish fella, and he had him standing by there. And, of course, Max spoke nothing but Yiddish. Now, he didn't speak German. He spoke Polish. He was an ex-sergeant from the Polish army. He was very rigid, and that's why Eckert liked him, because he was 1, 2, 3, he was German, And so he says, okay, we'll fix it up. So we went and he loaded up the whole bucket full of coal, and the two of us had to carry it. You know, it was a box. It had 4 handles, long ones, and 2 in the back, 2 in the front. We go up, and he said, I tell you what, he says, you go in the front, and I go in the back, or vice versa. He says, and I keep pushing you or pulling you. And I barely made it. I mean, my knees were just about shaking by the time. But Eckert was behind me. Oh, I was in the back. That's what it was, because I was always scared. He says, if I fall, I fall on him. So we made it, and so we coming back down. And as we were standing there, in comes a tall guy, all in a kind of a dirty overalls, you know, dirty face, tall guy. And Eckert says, Adam, Adam, and he points to him. And this Adam comes over, and he's towering over all of us. He's looking down, and he says to him, slowly, he will be working with you, that's in German, he will be working with you in the boiler room. And Adam is looking at him, he's trying to comprehend. And Eckert repeats it, and says it again. He's kind of shaking his head, he says. And so finally, Adam said to me, he says, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And I said, oh, he's trying to tell you that I'm going to be the new helper in the boiler room. And Eckert turns to me and says, what did you say? He says, he says, you understand German? I said, yeah. He says, why didn't you talk? I said, look, I was born in Germany, and my father and my mother taught me from very young never to speak when I'm not spoken to. And you did not address me. You did not speak to me because they said it would be very rude to interrupt or to talk to someone without being spoken to. He threw his hands on his hip. He pushed his cap over to the side. And he said, I have never heard anything like this. He says, but anyways, he says, so now you know. So go to work. So that was our first encounter. The next following day, the boiler room was in shambles. It was dirty, full of ashes. All those ovens were huge. They were enormous ovens. There was, 3, 4 of them. And everything was loaded with ashes, They had a gang. You can go over this whole thing, which people used to use, and it was dirty. So I set out to clean it up. And I told Adam, I need some oil from the motor pool. He says, you got connections, go. You can go. I can't. Go, bring me a few gallons of it. They're throwing it out, and a lot of rags. And I cleaned this place up. And a few days later, Eckert comes by, and he stopped. He said, he looked around, and he says, wow, she said, who did this? I said, if I have to work here, I might as well have a nice environment, clean. And he liked it. That was like, oh, hello. I mean, the Polak's been here for months and he never done anything, so you did fine. So then, of course, conversation started. More about, wanted to know more, where I was born, when I was born, did I have any more brothers or sisters, and one thing led to another. It's just a continuous, from that point on, every morning he was coming by to say, how's everything going?
Wow.
He would bring me some slices of bread. He would bring me some slices of coconuts, share it with the people. And I remember one day, he told me all about his family, that he's an accountant, and he comes from, he has a friend who is upstairs, who is a big man. Comes from his town. He also is an accountant. They both came from the same town. And he had a family, and he had a son about my age. And as time was going on, I said to myself, well, why is he so nice? And look, you cannot help but think, perhaps he feels that if his son would be in a situation like what I am in, and if there would be someone who would be a little bit nice, it would be good for him. I remember one morning he came by, or that morning it was actually midday, and it was strange to see him coming from the other side. And I was busy working down below. I think I had my back turned to the gangway, and it was upstairs. And he says, "Knobloch, how's it going?" I turned around, and I looked, and next to him stood a great-looking gal in a Luftwaffe uniform, Air Force. And he says, "Is everything okay?" I said, "Yeah, the ovens are producing a lot of steam. It's okay." And I said to myself, well, I was then almost 19. I said to myself, I was going to ask him, does she have a sister? I mean, we're in good terms here, you know. And he goes on. The next morning he comes by and he says, "So how did you like my friend?" I said, "Beautiful. That is really nice." I said, "Very good. You did well." You know, to this day, it's almost impossible to believe that a Gestapo man of his rank would talk to a Jew about things like this. About, this is personal. It's he didn't have to do that. No. He didn't. But he had... I think that he fell into this Nazi party by maybe mistake. He was not I couldn't see him being a hater.
Or being a killer.
Yeah. You know, it's like, I cannot shut it out. I cannot say no, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not with him 24/7. Yeah. Where he goes, what he does, what he has done before. You know, but I know he's there. And there's a lot of other things which came up, which showed me then that he is...
he befriended you. Yeah.
Yes. You know, when the time came that every department, no matter where you are, every concentration camp has to give up some Jews. So did we. We had 120, we have to give up 20. And so we were lined up that particular morning, and Mr. Gebertz was the eldest of the Jews in our place. Every department had to have an elder, because they wanted to go to the elder. You figure out, you make the list, you decide who goes. And that's all. We have a problem, we tell you what to do, and you carry it out. And so Mr. Gebertz is reading the list of the different people, and then finally my name comes up. And my dad is holding me back, and my brother is holding me back, and I don't know what to do, and I finally make the step, and I go forward. And then I hear this walk, and I hear this roaring sound, Knoblauch, step back, and it's like a dream, like, do I hear it or I don't? Because I'm already thinking, I see the gas chamber in front of myself.
You knew what was coming.
Yes. And so I hear my name again. And then I see in front of me is Eckert. And I step back quickly. I mean, that's an order. And he says to Gebertz, he says, get somebody else. And there's silence. And I look at the rest of the officers, and they're looking at Eckert, and Eckert stood there. He was knock-kneed, as it were, and he put his legs apart, threw his hand on his hips, and that was his favorite thing, and his hat to the side. It's almost like, I accomplished something, I'm happy. And he smiled. He said, and he went, when I got back and stood there, he went like this.
Wow. What a favor.
A few weeks later, he always told me, you do not go out to work for any other German. If they come, he said, you don't go. I said, how can I say I'm not going to go? They're going to blow my brains out. No, they have to come to me first. Well, this one guy came, and I couldn't say no. I saw that giant. I said, yeah, I'll unload it. And he saw it, and he came back, and he was very upset. And he told this German, he says, you get your own Jew. He says, and chances are you're not going to get one, because I'm in charge here. So you might as well unload the truck yourself. And this man had to unload his truck. This again, I said to myself, what is this man up to? On another occasion, the man who was in charge of the kitchen, he comes in and he says, can you come with me in the kitchen? And I said, yes. And I went. And he says, he was the chef and the butcher. And we're talking about 1930s, This is not... Actually, already was in the 40s now. And he had this huge grinding stone, which you had to go and turn like so, sitting on a chair. And he had all those big knives, and he's sharpening them, and he's sharpening them.
You turn the wheel, and he's sharpening.
Yeah, and he's talking to me, and I'm telling him my life story about, because, again, they all want to know why I spoke with a Saxon accent. So perfect. And I'm done, and he calls Marushka, the head girl in the kitchen. He says, feed Oscar. Well, when he said feed Oscar, once of a sudden all the girls come running down with plates. And I was a king. Needless to say, there was one of the girls, and she said, Sophia, she says, look, if you can't finish it, you can take it with you. I said, I have nothing to carry then. She says, I have a container, and she brought it in. It was a nice little red enamel container. She says, you can bring it back tomorrow. She says, get all your food, take it with you, and you can share it if you have anyone to share it with. You bring it back tomorrow, make sure it's clean, and she says, come at noontime, and if we have anything, I'll give you some more food. And from that day on, for some reason or another, I just walked out to the kitchen window, and she saw me. She come right there sliding in,
Thank you.
And took that container, and I had all the same what the officers were eating,
Wow.
And plenty of food to share. And so I was obligated after a few weeks that I should do something nice for this girl, And I asked my sister, I said, what I can't go to the store. What can I do? And she says, well, all the shoemakers. What if they could somehow make her a beautiful pair of sandals? Because they were making sandals for the German women.
Yeah.
So I went to this guy and I said, look, is it possible? He says, anything is possible. I said, okay. He said, give me your price. He says, there's no price involved. If she's a good woman and she's doing all this for you, good luck to you. And they made it, and I had to take measurements, of course, and when she got them, she said she has never worn a pair of anything that was made for her. That was the first thing.
Yeah.
And so we used to meet on her time off and just stand in the corridor and talk. And one day we were surprised by Mr. Eckert. He just came out of nowhere. And that day I said to myself, this is it. He's not going to like that. Here, me, a Jew, talking to a Christian woman. I mean, this was taboo. Yeah. That's a no-no. And he came by. I stepped to the side, and she stepped to the side. We were just talking, And because I wanted to know who she was, where she
Yeah.
come from, and she wanted to know my story, because I spoke Polish so good. And he comes by, and he's looking to say he's taking that stance, and he's biting his bottom lip. And he's looking and smiling. He says, "Good luck," and he walks on. It's unbelievable.
It is.
Unbelievable. You know, when I think back, it's like a dream. The human side of a Gestapo. Something else happened, and later on, which gives me credence to say there was a reason why he saved me that day from the transport. You see, something happened, which I will not say now, which you will read in the book. I have to leave some things for the book.
Okay.
I'm leaving quite a few things out as it is. But I can say frankly this, that what happened is something, he came to me for advice.
Eckert.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happened is that if it would be anyone else, all of us 100 who were left at that time would have disappeared. We would have been liquidated.
You would have been sent to the gas chambers.
Or to a concentration camp, to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was only 65 miles away.
Okay.
So, you know, it is something, but what I said to him, evidently, because after everything said and done, after the dust, so to speak, settled, he came out and said to the group, "I want you to know one thing." He said, "You have to thank little Knoblauch that you all are alive."
Wow. Wow.
And suddenly, out of nowhere, because back at Helslust, from day one, Mr. Gebertz, for reason unknown to me, I never met the man before, he didn't like me. So he made me, every Sunday, I had to wash that huge long corridor, mop it with water. And one day I said to him, I said, "Why me all the time? Why can't anybody else? I need to relax." And all he would do, he was mean. He would run and dump the bucket again.
What, he would kick it over?
Yeah, kick it over with the water.
Oh, wow.
So that day, when Sunday rolled around, he came up to me and he said, "It's about time that you don't do the floor anymore."
Wow. Wow.
Well,
Quite a story. Yeah.
it's a story. It's on many occasions he knew that my hair was always cut neat. And he knew that we didn't have a barber. He knew that I was getting the haircut done somewhere. He knew that I was somehow leaving this complex, which he called so secure, and yet I was going to the neighborhood barbershop.
Is that where you went?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Through a basement window.
Ah.
And one day, also, being that he found out that I know how to handle horses, they had horses there and a platform wagon to go to town, and we have to, my brother Sigmund and I would go and load up the furniture from apartments which they raided of Poles. So they would confiscate it and bring it to Pomorska. And we usually had a guard, and the guard was Fritje. But Fritje was on a bicycle, and he had things to do in town. He couldn't watch us. He didn't have to watch us. He knew we were not going to run away. Where's the run? Where do you run to? There was no place to run. You know, and when we came back and he opened up the gate for us, Eckert, and he says, "Where's Fritje?" He says, "I don't know where Fritje is. Maybe he's seeing a Fräulein." He says, "Oh my God," he says, "you could have run away." I said, "Eckert."
You had a chance. Yeah.
And I told him, I said distinctly, my brother never talked to him. He didn't, My brother never talked to him. He never talked to my brother. He never talked to any other Jews.
You were
Eckert
special.
talked to me. And I told him, I said, Herr Eckert, when it says, we can run away, yes, but there's no place to go right now. The time is not right. When the time is right, we'll go.
He appreciated that.
One day I asked him point blank, when things started to already, Stalingrad fell, and the German army was in retreat, and I said to him, okay.
You were aware of that.
Well, yes.
Of the Germans retreating.
I knew everything.
The war.
I knew everything. See, he was the quartermaster. Fritzsche, on the other side, on the other hand.
Well, Eckert was the quartermaster?
Quartermaster.
Oh, okay.
And Fritzsche was in the gathering department, political gathering, news and everything. Many times I had to sit on a bicycle which went to nowhere to get the batteries going, and he would listen to the shortwave radios to Moscow and to London, and he would listen either on his ears or loud. And one day his superior came in, Major Mulhouse, and he was upset. He says, what is this Jew doing here in this department? He says, it's highly secret. He says, he said, she doesn't know anything. He made a mistake, Fritzsche. He says, he doesn't understand German. And then a little while later, the Mullah turns to me, he said, so what is your name? And I said, Knobloch. He said, that's German, isn't it? I said, yeah, I was born in Leipzig. And he exploded. He says, you were not born in Leipzig? I was born in Leipzig, and there's no Jews in Leipzig now. So you were not born in Leipzig. Ooh. And I said, Herr Major, my mistake. I'm so sorry. I was born in Dresden. Wow. But he too, you see, something about speaking German with a Saxon accent, it's something made them, I don't know. I had no idea. I had no problem with neither one of them. But when I asked Eckert, what will happen to us when you guys going to be leaving? He says, you're going to go with us. You're going to be working for me. And I laughed and I said, Mr. Eckert, I said, your government tried so hard to get rid of all the Jews, and they did. You got rid of all the Jews, all the German Jews, everybody who was born there. And now you're going to bring them back? You know you're not going to do that. Now, Fritzsche had other plans too. Fritzsche was he was a Sudetendeutsche, not a Volksdeutsche. He came from Czechoslovakia, but spoke, fluently German, and he looked like a German. He looked like a real, true Aryan, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, walked like he was on a parade.
How about Eckert? Did he?
No, Eckert didn't look like an Aryan. Eckert, like Himmler, didn't look like an Aryan. Did Goering look like an Aryan? No. Did Hitler look like an Aryan? No. So but that's a story, by itself, something entirely different. But those men were all living in a different world, and I think they realized that they were chopping up the wrong trees. It just didn't. Yeah, Fritzsche had designs. He says, you have to be on a standby. Your sister, you, and your brother, because unfortunately my father we lost our father because he didn't come home one day from his assigned work, and we know that he was shot. He was killed by one of the men who he was taking him back and forth. Because when my sister approached him to find out, he said very angrily, he says, I can take all three of you right there so you can stay with him. You can be with him, not stay. So when Fritsch said that, he said, you know, you guys should be on a standby, because about a week before, he says, I need to go to Zakopane and get a load of lumber. Zakopane is on the border of Czechoslovakia and Poland. And that was his way of escaping with us.
Oh. Where was your mother at this time?
But the papers for my mom never materialized. And when my father came to the ghetto's door, the gate, to get her, they wouldn't let him in. He argued with the guard. He said that he has papers from the Gestapo. And they said at that time, he says, look, he said, if you don't leave now peacefully, we are going to get the commandant. And he likes to practice shoot Jews very easily. So you better get going. My mom was sent from the ghetto to Plaszów, the camp they had outside of Plaszów. From Plaszów, after a while, she was sent to Skarżysko, which was in the interior of Poland, where they had a ammunition factory. And then, when the Russians were progressing, believe it or not, she was resettled again with a whole bunch of other people from that factory to another ammunition factory, of all places, Leipzig.
Wow.
Coincidence? My whole life is a coincidence. The life of my mother was a coincidence. The life of my cousin, Rose, was a coincidence. Because she ended up in Auschwitz from Plaszów. And then when the Russians were progressing, she was put on a death march. The death march led her to Leipzig, to the same factory where my mother was.
It's a coincidence, yeah.
And this is where she reunited with her. Not that they recognized each other at first because they looked so bad. But my mom stayed alive because of two things. One, that she spoke German, and two, that her lady who was on the same line was a German woman from Leipzig. And when she found out that she spoke German, and she was from Leipzig, that her sons were born in Leipzig, and she doesn't know where they are, and she looked at my mom, she was packing from that day on 2 lunches.
Wow.
One for my mom and one for her.
Amazing story.
You talk about coincidences here?
Yeah.
This is almost unbelievable.
It is. Did your mom know that your father was shot?
Not until she was liberated.
Liberated by the Russians.
Liberated by the Russians. Some liberators. That's a story all by itself too. My sister Ilse and Sigmund and I, we were there to the last day, packing the Germans up, packing Pomorska up. Eckert and his friend left 1 week before the Russians came in.